The wagon pitched violently over a cracked ridge wheels, shrieking like wounded animals. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly around them, miles of jagged stone, dry sagebrush, and blood-orange sky. Clara Monroe leaned forward, arms locked around her son as she fought to keep the wagon steady. Her knuckles were raw from gripping the reins. Behind them, hooves thundered across the hardpan like drums of war. "Hold on, baby," she gasped, barely able to hear her own voice over the wind and gunfire. "Mama," her 6-year-old son, Caleb, cried out. His fingers clutched the frayed hem of her skirt as another bullet tore through the canvas cover above their heads. The wagon jolted as it hit a buried rock, then everything split. The front axle snapped clean, the left wheel shattered, and the wagon tipped. Clara threw herself over Caleb just as they were launched forward. They hit the ground hard. Her shoulder cracked against the sand. Pain exploded down her arm, but she didn't let go. Dust filled her mouth. Her ears rang, but she could still hear the riders approaching fast. She pushed Caleb toward a cluster of rocks nearby. "Go now," she hissed, breathless. "Hide, and don't come out until I say." The boy scrambled off, crawling behind the stones with his patched-up teddy bear in one hand. Clara turned back her dress, torn, her face streaked with blood and dirt. Her hands trembled as she pulled a small pistol from her boot. 2 bullets, that was all. From the corner of her eye, she saw one of the Lawson men dismount, a wicked grin on his face. His coat was dust-stained, his eyes cold. "Ain't no use fightin', ma'am," he called, strolling toward her with the slow swagger of a man who thought he'd already won. "We just want the boy." Clara stood, gun raised. "You'll take him over my dead body." The outlaw cocked his revolver. "That's the idea." Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air. Not hers. The outlaw jerked forward, mid-step, confusion on his face as a hole blossomed in his chest. He crumpled to the ground in a cloud of dust. Another shot rang out, one clean and fast, and the second rider fell from his horse. The third turned tail without a word and vanished into the growing twilight. Out of the haze rode a lone figure. Hat pulled low, long coat trailing dust. A rifle hung from his shoulder, still smoking. He moved with the calm of someone who had seen too many gunfights to flinch any more. Clara stared as the man dismounted and walked toward her. Her pistol stayed raised, but her grip weakened. Something in the way he moved, the way he scanned the horizon, was achingly familiar. Behind the rocks, Caleb peeked out. When he saw the stranger approaching, he bolted from cover. "Don't take my mama," the boy cried, planting himself between the man and Clara, arms stretched wide. The stranger stopped. His eyes, stormy gray, rimmed with dust, locked onto the child. Then up at Clara. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. The rifle slipped from his shoulder. "Clara." His voice cracked like desert bark peeling off an old tree. Clara stared at him, heart pounding. That face, that voice. "Logan," she breathed, as if speaking his name would break the spell. 7 years. 7 years since the night the fire took everything, burned their home to the ground, along with everything she loved. She had clawed her way out pregnant and alone, sure he had perished inside. She had mourned him, cursed him, and dreamed of him until the dreams went quiet. And now here he stood. Caleb turned confused. "Mama, who is he?" She stepped forward slowly, placing a protective hand on her son's chest. "He's just a man who helped us," she said, though her voice wavered with every word. But Logan's eyes were already fixed on Caleb, on the shape of his nose, the way his jaw clenched, and hanging from a chain around the boy's neck a pendant glinted silver in the dying light. A small letter L, his pendant. The same one Clara had given him on their wedding night. Wind howled low through the scrub brush, whispering like ghosts returning to the land. Logan's voice dropped to a whisper. That belonged to me. Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. Her hands, once steady, now shook as if something inside her had come undone. She tightened her grip on Caleb's shoulder and looked away, but it was too late. The truth, long buried in ash, and time had clawed its way back to the surface. And Logan Hawthorne had come home to a past that wasn't finished with him yet. Logan stood rooted in place, his boots half buried in the shifting sand, staring at the boy like he was some impossible apparition. Clara's hand remained firm on Caleb's shoulder, but even she couldn't stop the tremor in her voice. "Get behind me," she told her son, and he obeyed, watching the tall man with wide, unblinking eyes. Logan didn't move, not an inch. His gaze lingered on the pendant at the boy's chest, the same silver L charm he once wore around his neck like a badge of faith. "That was mine," he murmured again, his voice rough with disbelief. Clara couldn't bring herself to lie. Not outright. "I kept it," she admitted. Silence followed. Heavy, awkward, charged with the weight of a past neither had truly buried. A gust of desert wind stirred the sand between them. Caleb tugged gently at her skirt, whispering, "Mama, do we trust him?" She didn't answer immediately. Her heart thundered like it was trying to escape her ribs. She looked into Logan's face, leaner now with more sunlines and grit, but still the same man who once carved a wooden crib for a baby that never got to sleep in it. "We need to get the boy out of this heat," Logan said finally, his voice regaining its steadiness. "There's a garrison outpost about 2 miles north. Abandoned, but the roof still holds." Clara hesitated, torn between instinct and memory. She didn't want to follow him, didn't want to face the storm rising in her chest. But Caleb leaned against her weak from the fall, his face pale and sweat-slicked. She made a choice. "Lead the way," she said. They walked in tense silence, the fading sun bleeding across the sky like an open wound. Logan kept his distance but never let his rifle drop too far from hand. Clara carried Caleb, whispering reassurances into his ear, but her eyes never left Logan's back. The outpost rose like a scar from the landscape, crumbling stone walls, part-rotted shutters, and a door barely hanging from its hinges. Logan pushed it open with the butt of his rifle. The room inside was cloaked in dust, its air stale and shadow-thick. He stepped inside first, clearing the corners, his movements automatic. Clara followed, her boots soft against the worn wooden floor. Caleb clung to her, his skin burning with a fever that hadn't been there an hour ago. She laid him on an old cot after brushing away splinters and debris. Logan handed her his canteen without a word. Clara poured a few drops into the boy's mouth. He coughed, whimpered, and turned his face into her lap. She brushed the damp hair from his forehead and looked around in desperation. "I need something cool, a cloth, anything." Logan dug into an old sack, pulling out a strip of burlap. He soaked it with water and knelt beside the boy, pressing it gently to his forehead. Clara didn't thank him. She didn't need to. "He'll be all right," Logan said quietly. "It's the heat and fear." Clara stood a few feet away, arms folded tightly across her chest. "You don't know him." Logan looked up. "No, but I know what it's like to be that afraid." They lapsed into silence again. The only sound was the wind whistling through the cracked slats of the old walls. "You don't have to stand over there like I'm some outlaw," he said finally without turning his head. "I don't know who you are anymore," she replied, her voice brittle. Logan didn't flinch. "I buried you." She blinked. The words hit like gravel in the throat. "I came home that night late," he continued, voice like stone. "The house was already burning. I ran in anyway. got blown back by the blast from the cellar. When I woke up, the place was ash. They told me no one survived. They showed me burnt cloth, said it was yours." Clara's lips parted, but nothing came out. "I spent a year looking for the men who did it. Lawson's crew. I hunted them down one by one. I thought it was justice," he said. "Now I don't know what to call it." She swallowed hard. "You weren't the only one they left for dead." Logan finally turned. Their eyes met, full of ache and unspoken truth. "I wasn't in that house," she said softly. "Then where were you?" Clara didn't answer. Not yet. She knelt beside Caleb again, adjusting the cloth on his forehead, but her hand trembled. "I ran," she whispered, "from everyone." Clara's words hung in the air, brittle and frayed like a thread about to snap. Logan leaned back on his heels, eyes searching her face for something, answers maybe, or forgiveness. But she didn't look up from her son. Her fingers moved gently through Caleb's damp hair, more to steady herself than to comfort him. "When the fire started, I wasn't home," she said, voice barely louder than the wind pressing through the old shutters. "I was down by the river gathering wild mint. When I saw the smoke, I ran. But by the time I got close, the whole place was gone. I thought you were inside. I thought you'd burned." Logan sat silent, his back pressed against the wall, his rifle across his knees. His face was unreadable, but his jaw tightened with every word. "I went to the sheriff," she continued. "But the townspeople," her voice broke. "They thought I'd led the Lawson gang there. Said I must have been the one who told them where we lived. That I sold you out." "That's a lie," Logan said, a sharpness returning to his voice. "They didn't care. One woman spit at me. A man dragged me by the hair. I was bruised, bleeding, scared out of my mind. So I ran south, changed my name, waited out the worst of it. And when Caleb came..." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "I did what I had to do to keep him safe." He didn't interrupt. She didn't expect him to. "I didn't know you were alive," she added, her eyes finally meeting his. "And by the time I started to believe you might be, I was too deep in hiding to risk it." Logan looked toward Caleb, who still lay curled on the cot. Cheeks flushed, breath shallow but steady. The silver pendant rested against his chest like a mark of something too sacred to speak aloud. "He's just a boy," Clara said. "That's all that should matter." But Logan shook his head slowly. "No, he's more than that." He stood and walked toward the wall, resting his palm against the old timber like it might absorb the confusion that churned in his chest. "You didn't tell me." "I couldn't," she replied, rising to her feet. "You think I didn't want to. You think I didn't wake up every night wondering what it would do to him if he ever found out too soon that he had a father who might have been dead or worse. You should have trusted me." Clara's shoulders stiffened. "I didn't even trust myself back then." Another silence stretched between them, this one longer. He turned back to face her, every line in his body drawn tight. "I deserve to know the truth," he said quietly. "I deserve to know if that boy is mine." Before Clara could answer, Caleb stirred. He groaned softly, rolling to his side and opening his eyes a sliver. "Mama," Clara was at his side in a heartbeat, cupping his face. "I'm here, sweetheart." Logan stayed back, watching. Caleb blinked, squinting at the room and the unfamiliar ceiling. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe," she murmured. "You were sick, but you're doing better now." Caleb's gaze drifted toward Logan. "That man, is he staying too?" Logan crouched slowly. "I'll stay as long as you want me to, son." Caleb looked up at Clara. "Is he nice?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, he's nice." Caleb smiled weakly, then drifted back into sleep fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Clara smoothed his hair again and stayed quiet for a long moment. Logan watched her with a weight in his chest that he hadn't known how to name until now. Outside, the wind began to shift. Less dry now, more charged. "I'm not here to take anything from you," Logan said finally. "Not your life, not your son." Clara stood arms crossed, staring out the window at the darkening horizon. "But you are here, and everything's different now." Logan nodded once. "Yeah, it is." And as the last light faded from the sky, neither of them could deny that something old and broken had just begun to stir again. That night, the wind howled across the desert floor, sending long moans through the battered outpost. The wooden beams groaned in protest, and sand sifted through the cracks in the shutters like fallen ash. Inside, Logan sat by the door, his rifle resting across his lap, watching the shadows stretch and breathe in the flickering lantern light. Clara sat by the cot, one hand cradling Caleb's, the other pressed to his forehead. The fever had ebbed, but she refused to rest. Sleep for her had always come with ghosts. "You ever stop running?" Logan asked softly, eyes not leaving the door. "Only when I couldn't go any further," she replied without turning. "Then I started hiding." Logan tilted his head. "That's no way to live." "No," she said, "but it's the only way I kept him alive." A long silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke again, slower this time. "Tell me what happened after the fire." He shifted in his seat, his voice low and steady. "I came home late. We'd been fixing fence lines on the West Range. The sun was already down. I saw the smoke before I made it over the ridge. At first, I thought maybe someone had lit a cooking fire too high. But then I saw the flames. They'd already been through. Whoever they were quick and cruel. I ran straight into the blaze. The front door was already gone. I got as far as the cellar stairs before the explosion hit." Clara's shoulders flinched as he spoke. "When I came to, I was half buried in rubble. I clawed my way out. Couldn't find you, just ash and scraps. The sheriff showed me a piece of your dress, said no one could have survived. I didn't believe him, not right away, but every trail I followed led nowhere." And then she whispered, "I stopped looking for answers," Logan said bitterly, "and started looking for revenge." She turned to face him now. "The Lawsons." He nodded. "I tracked them across half the territory, killed more men than I'll ever confess to a preacher. Thought it would make the nightmares stop, but it didn't. Nothing did." Clara's throat tightened. "I tried to come back, you know. After Caleb was born, I made it as far as Red Mesa. Thought maybe enough time had passed, maybe someone would believe me. What happened? They still saw me as a traitor," she said. "One woman threw rocks. Another tried to take Caleb right from my arms, said no child should be raised by the devil's mistress. A deputy turned his back when I begged for help. So I turned around and never looked back." Logan's face darkened. "You should have told me. Somehow." "I was scared," she admitted. "Not just of them. Of what you'd say. What you'd think if you saw me again with a child you didn't know was yours." He stepped forward, slow measured, and knelt beside the cot. Caleb stirred slightly, his small chest rising and falling beneath the wool blanket. Logan reached out and lifted the edge of the boy's shirt. The silver pendant shone faintly in the lamplight. He cupped it in his palm thumb, brushing over the engraved letter. "I gave this to you," he said, "our wedding night." Clara nodded once. "I wore it every day, even after. I couldn't throw it away. When Caleb was old enough, I gave it to him. Told him it was from someone who protected people." Logan let the pendant fall gently back against the boy's chest. He stood slowly wincing from an old wound in his shoulder. "Why didn't you tell him the truth?" "I didn't know how," she said, "and I thought it would break him. Or maybe me." He walked to the window and looked out. The moon hung low, casting long silver lines across the sand. "He's strong," Logan said. "He's got your fight." "He's got your eyes," she replied, standing beside him now. They stood in silence again, not from lack of words, but because the words were too heavy. Too many years lost in smoke and silence. Finally, she spoke, voice soft. "What now?" Logan didn't answer right away. He turned back toward the cot, his eyes on the sleeping child. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not walking away. Not this time." Outside, a distant coyote howled. The wind carried the sound like a warning, or maybe a promise. Whatever storm lay ahead, it would have to go through him first. The wind had dropped by dawn, but the air was thick with tension. Clara stepped outside to fetch water from a half-buried barrel, her eyes sweeping the horizon. Logan stood at the fence line, crouched low, studying the dirt. When she returned, she saw his hand resting on a broken twig, his jaw set tight. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Tracks. Too fresh to be from yesterday. Smaller horses, light riders. Scouts, maybe." Her breath hitched. "The Lawsons." He stood brushing dust off his hands. "Could be. Or someone working for them. Either way, someone's watching." They spent the rest of the morning reinforcing the outpost. Logan reset old traps around the perimeter tripwires, rusted bear jaws, even an old tin can rattle alarm he rigged near the rear door. Clara helped where she could, but her focus kept returning to Caleb, still sleeping in the corner. His cheeks less flushed now, the fever breaking. That afternoon, as the sun hung high and hot, Caleb stirred fully awake. He blinked at the ceiling beams, then turned his head and saw Logan. "You're still here," he said, voice raspy but clear. Logan smiled from where he sat. "Told you I'd be." Caleb sat up slowly, blanket falling from his shoulders. "Are you a cowboy?" "Something like that." The boy tilted his head. "Can I call you Cowboy, man?" Logan chuckled. "Sure, kid. You can call me whatever you like." The moment stretched strange but warm. Clara watched from the hearth, a bowl of beans simmering over the fire. She said nothing, but her hands stilled. Later, while Logan stacked kindling and reinforced the shutters, Caleb sat at the old table with a charcoal stub and scrap of paper. He worked silently, tongue between his lips in concentration. When Clara came over to check on him, she froze. He had drawn 3 figures: a woman with long hair, a boy holding a stuffed horse, and beside them a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat. All 3 held hands. Caleb looked up proudly. "It's us." Logan stepped over. His boots were dusty hands, rough from work, but his expression softened as he crouched. "You're quite the artist. Do you like it?" Caleb asked. "Very much," Logan replied, voice low. Clara turned the drawing over, placing it face down on the table. But Logan had already seen it. The boy had drawn what his heart already knew, even if his mind hadn't caught up yet. That night, the outpost was quiet. Too quiet. The air was so still, it felt like the land was holding its breath. Logan sat near the front door, rifle across his lap, while Clara tended to the fire. Caleb had curled into sleep again, his little wooden knife beneath his blanket, just where Logan had placed it hours earlier. Clara came to stand by the window, arms wrapped around herself. "He's a good boy," Logan said without looking. "He's got your smile," she answered. He turned to her, and something else. Courage. Clara nodded once quietly. Logan moved toward the cot. He knelt beside Caleb, gently lifting the edge of the boy's shirt again. The silver pendant glinted in the firelight. He picked it up between his fingers, thumb brushing over the engraving once more. "You kept this," he said. Clara stepped closer. "It was my wedding gift to you. I couldn't bear to throw it away." He let the pendant fall back onto Caleb's chest. "You told me I was dead," he said quietly, "but you're the one who vanished." "I didn't vanish," she replied. "I survived." His voice tightened. "You were pregnant, Clara, and you ran." She blinked hard. "I thought you were gone. I saw the fire. I ran to the woods and didn't look back. You could have sent word. I was hunted," she snapped. "By the gang. By our neighbors. I had nothing. No home, no name, no one. Only him." Logan looked down at the boy. Caleb slept peacefully, his hand curled under his cheek. "He's all I had left," Clara whispered. "And I didn't want him growing up chasing ghosts." Logan's voice cracked. "You think I'm a ghost?" Clara hesitated. "I thought you were a memory." He sat back on his heels, looking at Caleb with the eyes of a man who had finally found something worth staying for. "I thought I buried everything he said, but he's proof I didn't." Outside, a soft rattle. Logan stood fast, metal on metal. One of the tripwires had been tripped. The faint clatter of metal against metal sliced through the night like a blade. Logan didn't hesitate. He moved to the window eyes, scanning the darkness beyond the outpost's walls. The moonlight stretched long and low, revealing shadows too many to be tricks of the wind. 4, no 6, maybe more. "Clara," he whispered, "get Caleb. Down to the cellar. Now." She was already on her feet, scooping the boy into her arms. He stirred, murmuring in confusion, but she didn't explain. She moved fast, lifting the trap door near the hearth and lowering Caleb down. The boy blinked, still half asleep, as she kissed his forehead. "Stay quiet, baby. Do not make a sound." Logan bolted the door just as a shot rang out. Wood splintered inches from his head. He dropped into a crouch, rolled to the wall, and returned fire. One figure collapsed in the dust outside, a sharp cry lost in the wind. Another ran straight into a buried bear trap. Screams echoed through the night, metal snapping bone. "They're coming from both sides," Logan shouted, reloading with a speed honed by 7 years of surviving ambushes. One window shattered. Another bullet carved into the floor by Clara's feet. She ducked low, crawling toward the trap door, but just as she reached it, the back door buckled under a heavy slam. A man burst through, grabbing Clara by the arm and dragging her backward. She fought, but he was stronger. "Let her go," Logan roared, firing his rifle. The bullet missed by inches, too risky with Clara so close. The outlaw pulled her toward the exit, using her as a shield. But then a small shape appeared in the hallway, Caleb barefoot, terrified, but clutching the wooden knife Logan had carved. "Let my mama go," the boy shouted. The outlaw laughed, cruel and dismissive. "Look at this little..." Caleb lunged. The knife wasn't sharp, not truly, but it was real. The outlaw kicked the boy hard in the chest, sending him flying across the room. Clara screamed. Logan saw red. He dropped the rifle and charged. They collided with a crack of bone and flesh. The outlaw's gun flew from his hand. They hit the floor hard, wrestling fists flying. The man slashed Logan across the shoulder with a hidden blade, but Logan didn't stop. He grabbed the knife, turned it, and drove it deep into the man's side. The body went still. Logan staggered up, breathing hard, blood staining his sleeve. He barely had time to lift his revolver before 2 more men burst through the front. He shot one in the throat. The other charged with a club. Logan let him get close. Too close. Then ducked low, ramming his shoulder into the man's gut. The outlaw crashed into the wall, dazed. Logan didn't hesitate. One more shot between the eyes, and it was over. Silence fell. The room swirled with dust smoke and the sharp smell of blood. Clara crawled to Caleb, cradling him in her arms. He whimpered, holding his ribs, but was breathing. "Papa," Caleb whispered through tears. Logan dropped to his knees beside him, ignoring the pain screaming through his side. He reached out, brushing the boy's hair back. "Yeah," he said softly, "I'm here." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with everything she hadn't dared to believe. "You're hurt," she said, panicked, trying to stop the bleeding. Logan gave her a crooked smile. "Not as bad as I could be." Caleb reached for his hand, and Logan took it, grimy, trembling, but strong. "You were brave," Logan whispered. "Braver than I've ever been." The boy leaned into him, clutching his arm, small fingers pressing against Logan's chest like an anchor. Outside, the desert wind shifted again, this time carrying no threat, just the stillness that comes after battle. Inside, despite the broken door, the shattered glass, and the bullet holes lining the walls, something had changed. Something stronger than fear or fire had begun to take root. A child had chosen his father, and a father had chosen to stay. Logan lay on the floor beneath a patched wool blanket, his face pale and streaked with blood. Clara pressed her hand to the wound in his shoulder, trying to slow the bleeding. Her fingers shook, but her voice was steady. "Stay with me. Don't you dare close your eyes." His gaze fluttered toward her. "You never stop being beautiful," he rasped. "Shut up," she choked, blinking fast. "Just breathe." From beside her, Caleb crawled forward, placing his small hand in Logan's calloused fingers. "Is he gonna die?" the boy asked, his voice tight and raw. Logan's hand twitched around Caleb's. He turned his head toward him. "Kid," his voice was more air than sound. "Are you mine?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Caleb looked from him to Clara. "Mama never said." He turned. "Mama, am I his son?" Clara froze. Then, tears finally breaking loose, she nodded. "Yes, you are." Caleb's lip trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara cupped his face. "Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd lose you both again." Logan exhaled shakily. Clara took Caleb's hand and placed it firmly in Logan's. She wrapped hers around them both. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "And when I learned you weren't, I couldn't bear the thought of you hating me for hiding him, for running." Logan looked at the boy, his boy, and something cracked open in him. Something deep and heavy that had been buried since the fire. "You're the reason I kept walking," he whispered to Caleb. "I just didn't know it was you." Caleb swallowed hard. "You're my papa." A tear slipped down Logan's dusty cheek. "Yeah," he whispered. "I am." Clara pressed her forehead to his. "You're not dying. Not again. You live for him." "I'll try," Logan murmured. "But if I don't, just know I died with my son's hand in mine." "No," she said fiercely, "you're going to live. For us." He searched Caleb's face. "So much of me is in you, even when I wasn't there." "I waited," Caleb whispered. "Didn't know who I was waiting for, but I think it was you." The silence after wasn't empty. It was full of truth. Logan's eyes closed, but his grip stayed firm. 3 days passed. Clara nursed his wounds with boiled sage poultices. She spoon-fed him broth, changed his bandages, barely slept more than an hour at a time. And Caleb never left his side. He brought Logan water-brushed flies from his face, tucked his blanket without being asked. One night, as the lantern dimmed, he lay curled beside Logan's good arm. "Good night, Papa," he whispered. The words struck deeper than any bullet ever had. When Logan finally opened his eyes on the 4th morning, Clara was there, a basin of clean water at her side. You stayed, he murmured. Of course, she said. He looked toward Caleb. Is he all right? Better than you. He insists on sharpening that little wooden knife. Logan smiled faintly. My kind of boy. Later that day, Caleb came running from outside with a small wildflower in hand. For you, Papa. Logan took it, his throat tightening. Thank you, son. That night, Logan finally sat up in a chair by the fire. Caleb leaned against Clara's side, drowsy. Logan looked at them both, at the life he thought had been turned to ash. I need to say something, he said, his voice stronger. I'm not asking to pick up where we left off. I know too much is broken for that. Clara said nothing, just listened. But I want to be his father. Teach him to ride, to fish, to fight if he needs to. To know where he comes from, not just what happened to us. And I want to be whatever you'll let me be, even if it's just a roof and a promise. Clara stood, walked over, and took his hand. You already are, she said. You've been his father since the night you gave him that knife. And mine, long before the fire. Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. We're a family, Logan Hawthorne, she said, even if it took us 7 years and a bullet to figure it out. He looked down at her hand in his. Then, let's not waste another day. From the corner, Caleb stirred. Papa. Logan smiled. I'm here, son. And for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't running. He was home. 1 month later, the desert was no less wild, but it no longer felt cruel. By the stream's edge, a new cabin stood with smoke curling gently from the chimney. Laughter echoed from the porch where Caleb rode a young mare in wide, wobbly circles. You sure he's ready for a horse of his own? Clara asked with a smile, arms full of wild lavender. He's stubborn, Logan replied. He'll figure it out. Inside the cabin above the hearth hung 2 things side by side, the old rifle cleaned and retired, and the wooden knife polished and mounted with care. That evening, Logan buried his Colt .45 beneath the roots of a willow. Clara watched from the porch broom in hand, her eyes never leaving him. He returned, scooped Caleb into his arms, and sat in the rocking chair. She stood behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. This is home, he whispered to Caleb. The boy stirred in his sleep, murmured something, then nestled closer. And in that quiet, in the embrace of the woman he once lost, and the son he had found, Logan Hawthorne knew the war was over. Not the one with bullets, the one inside. Sometimes the hardest roads don't lead you back to where you started, they lead you somewhere better. Logan didn't return to reclaim his past. He returned to become the kind of man the future needed. A man worthy of a child's trust, of a woman's forgiveness. We often think survival is about fighting, but sometimes it's about staying. It's about showing up after the fire, after the silence, and saying, I'm here. I'm not leaving again. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest kind of courage. And love, it doesn't always arrive on time. But when it does, it knows how to stay. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that home isn't just a place, but a promise, then leave a comment and tell us what you'd fight to come home to. And don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of the Wild West, because out here the bullets may miss, but the heart always hits its mark. We ride with the brave, and sometimes the bravest thing of all is coming home.